Let me go ahead and get my screen sharing going. And is everyone able to see the screen?
Yep. See the PowerPoint now.
Awesome. Let me go ahead and pull the webinar panel off of this year. And I already have a request for the guy because the person that programmed this thing to auto collapse, it's only like 1 pixel you can grab to stretch the panel. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. We had a handful of questions that were sent in. Calvin Dekker, I'm over at CodaBears, going to be doing the presentation today on MRP and scheduling. And because everybody has a different way that they handle scheduling, or we create our jobs, we're make to order, we're make to engineer. We turn around, do everything, make to stock, and then we ship those against the orders. Everybody has a different way of doing. So MRP and scheduling is kind of a magical art based on how the information's coming to you. Is it coming in through EDI and forecasts? Are we using sales forecasts? Is everything a sales order as it goes directly in? So there's not really a one-size-fits-all answer. So that's why I turned around and sent out, if you can, go ahead and send in your questions for MRP and scheduling. And we ended up getting 4 people, and then this morning Arno turned around through his in from Remke, so I went ahead and updated the slide deck, so I have you in here, Arno. And I just asked everybody, what's your question? So I went ahead and went through each one. I'll share each of the questions that came in and kind of how to handle the issue that the person was having and how to fix this. And then I'll open this for a whole Q&A session on jobs and MRP and scheduling, or pretty much anything's free game out there for a question. I'll try and keep an eye on the question board as well. So the first question came in from Joe over at Latitude, and I don't know, is Joe in on the call? I know he sent out an email asking to join in at the last minute.
I don't see him in the attendees list.
Okay. His question was, they get forecasts in for their sales orders, and they turn around, put the forecast into the system, but then they turn around and get daily updates via EDI, where how do we turn around and handle this? They're not, unfortunately, removing the forecast. I turned around and got the question confirmed. The order releases are getting updated, but the forecast record is not getting removed. If they tie the forecast directly to that customer, it will consume it. But if there's still more out there, they're going to get a suggestion. And they were looking, how can they turn around and hide these if they're not cleaning up that forecast record? The days before and days after setting in company configuration was for the consumption of the forecast record. So if the order has a certain date and it's within that threshold before or after setting, Epicor is going to turn around, handle that, and consume that forecast by all those orders in that date window. Now, there's also another area with the rescheduling out and rescheduling in to prevent the expedite and postpone suggestions. His question really wasn't about that. He just wanted to stop the other. But in the same way, we can turn around and control those expedite and suggest suggestions that he was receiving. And the planning time fence was the number of days that a purchase order, a transfer order, one of the supply records or demand records in there is going to be from the current date. And these are the 3 areas that are going to answer most of them.
Hey, Calvin, Joe is on the line. I'm going to unmute him in case he's got questions. Joe, you should be unmuted if you want to give any feedback to Calvin here.
Now I see him out there. Joe, you're very quiet. Is this answering the question that you had?
I think we lost Joe. If you want to just keep going, and I'll leave him
Yeah, he just
unmuted in
went-
case he joins in.
Yeah, it just went unattentive when I hovered over his name. So, okay. So the next question that turned around and came in from the field was from Matt Benowitz over in Iowa, asking, and I hope I pronounced that right, Matt, resource calendar exceptions, having the job timeline update the jobs after you turn around and rerun changes. So if putting in information right now, they'll make a scheduling change. But it's not taking into account all the jobs that are out there if I change the schedule. You have to reschedule the jobs in order for the updates to be taken effect. The schedule only if I update the production calendar or a resource calendar or any calendar linked to one of those. It's only going to affect jobs moving forward that get created and put on the schedule. It's not going to affect any of the ones that are already out on your schedule. And you should get a message after you change the schedule that you need to regenerate the shop capacity process as well. The capacity records that are stored, the jobs are going to look to that capacity plan, what's available, and then put the jobs into those buckets. If we never update what those buckets are, it's never going to know how to schedule the jobs into it. So after you run that generate, you still have to run the scheduling, whether that's through global scheduling, manually clicking remove from the job schedule and re-add it. And I say that very carefully. I have a couple versions of Epicor I've seen where if you don't remove it from the schedule before you reschedule it, it ends up putting the job out there twice. So there were a couple bug fixes through patches. I'm not sure which version we're on right now if it has it, but you want to make sure that you remove the job from the schedule before you throw it back out there, Matt. But the only way to get that change to take effect on your resource calendar or an exception that you put in there is by rerunning that schedule process. Matt actually had 4 scheduling questions in his email to us, so I went ahead and put all 4 sections here. Matt, are you on the call?
Is that Matt Hermson?
Benowitz.
Matt Benowitz is, I don't see on the call, no.
Okay. Another one was calendar change process, going from a 40 to a 50-hour week, or making a change to the calendar. How do I see a what if schedule for doing that? There really isn't a way to do that where I can change the production calendar from a 40 to 50 and see what the impact would be. This is where I would recommend also copy the database from production, put it in your test or pilot instance, modify the production calendar, then go ahead and generate your shop capacity, run the global scheduling process, and you would see how the load would then get dispersed and balanced. You would have to compare the 2 systems. There's no way to really do that in one system. Let's see here. The other thing that he had mentioned is, how do I see where do I have an overload? How do I determine if we need to take overtime? Or how do we handle this shop load if it's over? The shop load report is already in the system, but I am going to recommend running it in summary mode rather than in detail. I think it's a little easier to read when you're looking for, do we need to take overtime? The other question is, do you need to buy an extra resource? Are you continually overloaded? Or do we need to just have a chat with the sales team and say, you can't promise these dates, we just can't meet it? But the shop load report in summary mode should show you what your load is against what your capacity is. that's already built into the system. But the calendar changing process, the only way to affect a major global change would be turning around and creating a copy of your system and then altering the setup and then running the scheduling to see how that goes if you want to go to a 50-hour week. Matt's third question was how to handle break times. And I'm going to throw this out because I have not seen a good way to handle this. So I'm going to throw this out to the field if anybody on the meeting also has a way of handling this. And the break times as well as the lunch times, how are these handled by the system? When you set the production calendar up and you have a shift time or a break, it's not taken into account. That has to be manually done when you set your production calendar up. So if you're going to allow 4 breaks during the day, you're going to have more time. If you allow 2 breaks and a lunch, this has to be taken out of the production calendar. I'll recommend a client when planning capacity with a production calendar is how many hours are there in the shift? Take out our breaks and lunches. Adjust for a department efficiency. If we know the work center always runs at 80%, if I tell the system, hey, we have a 10-hour shift, well, if I have an hour for lunches and breaks, I'm now down to a 9-hour. If I have an 80% efficiency, I'm down to 7 point something in here. So if I set the calendar up for 10 hours, Epicor is going to schedule for those 10 hours thinking that's the throughput that's going through that either resource group or through the plant. If I don't adjust for these factors, Epicor is going to schedule the system so that by the next morning, I'm already behind the 8 ball. I'm not able to turn around and run my jobs on track because I didn't get 10 hours of productivity for the jobs that I scheduled. So I generally recommend to people, go ahead and set your production calendar up, planning for what you're going to actually get. Otherwise, you're going to be reworking the schedule every day or every shift based on how long you're open. The other thing I'll recommend I have in the 5th point is set the hours to be contiguous. If I have my calendar set up so that it's 1 hour available from 1 to 2, then it's shut down, then it's available from 3 to 4. When I turn around and have to schedule a job that requires so many hours, Epicor is going to look to schedule that when they're contiguous. If the hours have a break or you take the lunch break out in the middle, you end up running the risk that if the job needs 6 contiguous hours to run, it can't find that anywhere, so it never schedules it. And that can become a problem as well. So I'll generally recommend try and keep them contiguous.
Hey, Calvin?
I see a question just came in from Andrew Murdoch. On the calendar, does it matter if the hours are 1 to 8 being checked or if it's 6 to 13 being checked? That doesn't matter. The only thing that's going to affect is when you look at your job schedule, is it having it start the job at 1 o'clock in the morning or is it starting it at 6 o'clock in the morning? If you want it to tie closer to your work schedules of when people are there, or you want to make sure that jobs are handled, I want the work orders finished by 1 p.m. in the afternoon so they can be shipped out by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then setting the different times of the day if you're going to schedule by that. And we have a few clients where they run their job nesting so that all the jobs that are nested at 8 o'clock in the morning will come out, and then the jobs that are nested for the 10 or 11 o'clock run come out together, and then the 1 o'clock, so that they can make sure that they cycle jobs through the departments in a nested fashion. So they will turn around and use the actual hours that the department is available so that they can nest the job operations that way as well. Awesome. I'm going to assume Fred just answered that question because it just disappeared. And I'm like, Tracy has a question. We'll hit that. She has a stump to chump. So setting up the calendars, I'm going to recommend do a little forethought planning. Don't turn around and set yourself up for failure by being behind the 8 ball and saying, hey, I've got all this time on Monday, when you're not actually going to see that throughput come out of the people or the machines that are working.
Calvin, I have a question on that. So this is Hasso.
Fire away.
So question about the calendar. If I remember correctly, the scheduler engine isn't good when you have a time gap. Like it kind of has struggles with the time gap. Does that mean then, like in your calendar screenshot, let's say your lunch is in the middle, would you uncheck like the third checkbox?
If they turned off the 9 o'clock,
Yep.
yeah, I wouldn't recommend. That's why I say the hours
Oh,
should be contiguous in here.
got it.
You don't want a gap in between.
Okay, I see. So then what you do is you just kind of schedule, you take an hour away and say I'm working 7 hours, but do not make a gap. Start at 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. instead of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., right?
Correct.
Okay.
You don't want to put the gaps in there. That'll end up with some wonky scheduling processes.
Okay. Thank you.
Matt's final question was, scheduled jobs are falling off of his material or multi-resource scheduling board. And actually, they should not be falling off at random. As job information, they turn around and put a block of time out for a job. And then as they continually do the engineering and fine tune the job, he was saying that they're falling off of the scheduling board. Actually, it shouldn't fall off at random. As you put more and more job information in there, tighten what resource schedule or what resources applied to the job or resource group, it should start falling off the multi-resource scheduling board when you have it scheduled to a true job. And I have no clue why my screen is going forward and backward, but the next person, Phil Collier over at PAGG, I believe, Precision Aero and Gear, multi-company. They do aerospace parts in a multi-company, and everything is serialized, and they can take up to 18 months or longer to manufacture. Is there a way to set up MRP to create a new unfirm job rather than suggesting to increase a quantity on a job? Not a big fan of this, but increasing and decrease suggestions are coming from MRP. This is handled by the days of supply. The field will actually go up to 999 days out. An 18-month lead time would be about 540 days. So in theory, this should work, but I haven't actually tested it. You'd have to turn around and put your days of supply out there so that, okay, if it's after the 540, then go ahead and give me a new suggestion rather than getting an increased quantity or decreased quantity. But that would have to be setting what the days of supply would be. That would be on the part master. So Phil, that should answer your question, I'm hoping.
Phil, you're unmuted if you want to dive in there too. Calvin, there's a question that popped up from Augustine. Due to supply chains being affected by the current situation, would it be ideal to add a move time of X days to make up for supplier late deliveries, essentially causing the required demand dates to be sooner?
Or put a receive time on the part as well, so that, okay, let's make sure that we get the PO out there with a receive time so that we're accounting for the supplier's variance that they need. Ideally, we shouldn't be altering the system to handle suppliers. Suppliers are coming in late, they're late, we need to get them fixed so that we're not affecting production schedules. If they are late, it's going to affect and impact the entire plant. So you could also use receive times, and you can put the receive time on the either on the part record or on the part class and say everything in stainless steel now has a 2-day receive time, but anything in titanium has a 5-day receive time.
Okay, and from Wendy Dunphy, I use lot quantity to quiet the increase and decrease suggestions.
Yep, that's another way to turn around and handle those. So that would be a great suggestion also for Phil.
And then Jennifer Sheldon, you can also lock job quantity so MRP won't suggest you. Yep. And Rick, changing days of supply. Do you make it longer, meaning more days, or shorter, fewer days, to make MRP create a new unfirmed job and not request an increase in quantity?
Rick, I would probably shoot towards the shorter, just so that you get a new job suggestion out there for something that's a super long lead time.
Okay, I think that takes care of all the questions that folks have put in so far.
Okay, and to our one that came in kind of at the last minute here, Michael, had planning with capability stops and scheduling. It is going to stop scheduling. When you turn around and use capabilities in your scheduling, you're telling the system, I want to use this machine, this person, this tool. All three have to be available. If that employee is only available on one shift, but you want the job to continue into a second shift, Epicor has kind of a limitation right there. It doesn't know how to handle scheduling a second shift or a third shift, because you turn around and put the capability on it that it has to be this specific person. I would almost say, rather than scheduling to a specific person, schedule to a capability and assign the person to the capability. But I believe he was turning around and setting it to an operator and a machine, and that's going to have a problem. It's not going to let you go into the second and third shift. So capability-based scheduling is using, I believe it's the advanced production and scheduling module. So this is an advanced one that's not going to be in the base software, but that's where you're allowed to schedule multiple resources to an operation more than just the two that's by default. The operator is only going to be available for the hours that's on their schedule. Epicor is only going to schedule for that piece. It's not going to continue it, even though you want the job to continue running. That would be one way, or turn around, like I was saying, set up a generic capability or generic labor so that, okay, these 4 employees all have that capability. They can turn around and work on that job across shifts. Those were the ones that came in. Then I had Arno's question that came in this morning, so I went ahead and added this in here for you, Arno. Is that the same one? I see you have a question here that you just sent in, question MRP. Yes, this is the exact same one that you sent over. So more advanced steps to take troubleshoot odd suggestions. Sometimes no suggestions get made. They're just not making sense. And besides the obvious lead time, planning days, what's a better way for handling some of these things to find the leaks? And I'm going to throw part of this also out to the group, but the only thing that I would really have is under company configuration. There is the option in the scheduling section to enable the debug log and then include extra details. And these get written to the Epicor data where your MRP log files get written, but they'll have a very verbose information set as to what happened and why. And taking those log files and just doing a search and find for the anomalies can be done because it's going to be prefixed with an error. Whatever you do, do not leave these settings turned on in company config. It will eat up the hard drive on your server. These log files can get very large when MRP runs. It's a great way to do debugging, but it's not something you want to leave on in a continuous mode. But you would turn around and then see, okay, what was the problem with the schedule? Why couldn't it turn around and do this? And same thing to Hasa's question, if you don't have the hours contiguous, you're going to see that it couldn't find that scheduling block to put this job within.
Hey, Calvin, this is Joe. I have a couple questions when you have a moment.
Awesome, bring it on.
So can you go back to the screen? I just figured out how to ask a question, so sorry about that.
Which one?
My question. The first one.
Got it.
So the question I have is, we, like you mentioned, we get our forecast, we download it, okay, which creates a EUG job, and then the next day he'll send us a PO. Then we enter the sales order. If we don't remove the forecast, it doubles up on our jobs the next day. So we've been removing the forecast manually for each PO that comes in during the week. And is there a way to make that so we don't have to do that?
Yes. I'm going to see if I can just log into an Epicor session. I hate having 4 monitors. You never know where it's going to pop up. Or flat out, it's not going to pop up. There we go. On the forecast entry screen, I'm going to try and pull up the screen here and throw it on. Okay. It is behind all of the GoToWebinar panels, and they are fixed. So we're going to go ahead and head over to forecast entry. On the bottom of the forecast entry, when you set up the forecast for a part, you can also specify what customer it's for. As you enter their PO as an order, it will consume the forecast then. You're tying the forecast directly to that customer. That may be a way to also help out. If it's within the days of before and days after, Epicor should be consuming the forecast automatically because that should be all customers. But you mentioned
the question I have about that,
sales order.
The question I have is, what if the forecast is different, like per product group? So let's say they have a dozen product groups, but they don't give us firm jobs for like 6 weeks out on all the product groups. Some groups are 3 weeks, some are 5, some they give us, 6, 7 weeks of firm orders, but then the rest are on firm. So how
are
do I
they
make
not giving you firm at least by part number? They're doing it by product group?
No, but yeah, so in some cases they only give us like 2.5 weeks of firm orders. The rest are forecasted. So in that case, when they forecast it one day, it may have 400 in for the week. And in this case, they're only going to release one day, and then the forecast stays. And the other scenario is, for some product group, some go down to our Phoenix plant, and then some go here to Fitchburg. So the ones that go to Phoenix, he gives us a 7-week window, and the ones that go to our plant in Fitchburg, they only give us a 3-week window of released POs. So it's all over the map.
The other thing I would think, and Hasso, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you could, as you add the sales order, have a method directive when you update the order release to decrement the forecast for you.
Is that like a special
custom? Yeah, that would be that would be a custom method directive. But as you're entering the order, have it go out and decrement the forecast. The only drawback, if someone puts an order in and then changes it from 5 down to 3, does it go out and add the other 2 back to the forecast then?
Yeah, most of the times they don't make a quantity change, they'll add another line.
Okay.
Okay.
And
so,
are you accepting the changes within the lead time on the part?
yeah.
So if they send you an update if we have a lead time on the part of 15 days and they're sending you an update that says ship it tomorrow, are you accepting that?
In most cases, we've come up with a way to make whatever our customer wants.
Because then I would say turn around and then move it to inventory and keep a roving inventory for your customers so that you have
which we do in some cases. Because they run an assembly line and we know what they're going to do, so we make lots and buckets of product. So I'm thinking more of the customization is what I think it's going to work the best for us. So we'll talk to Matt and probably get a hold of you guys here in the near future.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, how so?
This is Matt.
Matt.
So did I hear you correctly that if we put a customer, if we define a customer on one of the forecast entries, that it should consume the demand without having the days before or days after be anything other than 0?
Correct. If you're setting the days before and after at 0, as the customer puts an order in for the date of the forecast, that would get consumed on that date. You could turn around and do a 1 or 2 day, but if you guys are accepting order changes the day after or 2 days from now, your days before and after for your forecast window might be useless.
Gotcha. So the way that our forecasts are entered is that each entry is a week bucket. So each line item is a 1 week time period. So if the sales orders, what was it? Is it the due date? What date is it referencing on the sales order?
The forecast is the ship by date.
Okay. Oh, ship by date. Okay. So if the sales order corresponds, if the sales order corresponds to that same 1 week bucket of whatever line in the forecast here, if we have the customer defined in the forecast, it will consume some of that quantity.
Correct. And if you're doing weekly buckets, you could do a 5-day, if you're entering it, say if your forecast is on the 14th, you could do a 5 days before, 0 days after, then any order entered with one of these dates goes in and consumes that forecast.
Gotcha. But you don't think we need to define the days before, days after? We can leave it at 0 right now and just see if by entering that customer, it does start getting consumed?
Well, if you're entering your forecast already in weekly buckets, then I would set the days before as a 5-day window. Then any order with a ship by date between the 10th and the 14th would consume that forecast for the customer linked on it.
Yeah, in most cases, they're giving us at least 2 weeks. Sometimes they'll add in something, but most of the time they're giving us 2 weeks of firm up to 7 weeks in some product lines and some ship dates.
Anybody have any other suggestions for handling that? I saw Jennifer Sheldon was typing, so I know she always has ideas.
Yeah, that was one of Joe's concerns, and I wasn't sure that it really mattered that we didn't get consistent windows per part number. Like it doesn't, in my mind, it didn't really matter whether we only got 2 weeks of view for this part number versus 7 weeks of view for this other part number. It's like if it's in there and we have a sales order for it, it's going to consume it, or it's not if there's no forecast for it. But if no one else has any other suggestions, I mean, we can at least, I think we've got some good stuff we can try here. I didn't realize that it should consume it even with our days before and after set to 0 if it's within the same time period. So we can at least try that.
Well, if the days before and after are set to 0, that means the ship by date has to match the forecast date.
Okay.
Which it does.
But that would be a specific day by day. If you're only forecasting for a whole week, then you may want anything that was set for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to consume all out of that forecast.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
It's at the 5 day before.
5 days before? Okay.
Do you guys work the weekends?
No.
Okay. Otherwise, if you have Saturday also as a production and shipping schedule, then I would consider moving your forecast date to there and going a 6 day before.
What is
Or do a day after and 5 days before then.
What is the day of the week that the forecast, each line item is for, Joe? Is it for a Monday or is it for a Friday? What's the date?
It's based on the production calendar that's set on your company configuration. So if you're set for a 5 day week or a 7 day week, that's going to be based on whatever's linked on your company or on your plan.
Yeah, the forecast, Matt, is it looks like it's all over the map, unfortunately.
Oh, so each bucket each line item isn't always just a Monday?
No, I mean, if I look at stuff with this one product I'm looking at, I'll put in the part number here. Yeah, some are, yeah, it looks like it's 12, looks like it's on a Monday.
Okay, so if the forecast line item is always on a Monday, wouldn't we want to do days after, Kelvin? Or maybe I'm not understanding that properly.
Let me look here.
Yeah, if you enter the forecast date as a Monday, then you may want to look at 5 days after. So everything in that week is consumed with the 0 days before. It depends on where you enter the forecast date. If the forecast is on Monday, then do 5 days after it's the whole week's forecast.
Yeah, looking at it, the forecasted date is to be due on a Monday.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. I just wanted to show that.
I think we'll have to look, Matt, for sure, and get with Cody to make sure. But what I see is that's.
Okay, that's everything I had. Thank you, Kelvin.
Thanks a lot, Kelvin.
Yep, and I've got a question here from Brian Schiller. Multiple departments have more resources than operators. So you got a lot of machines that can be run one operator spread over 5, I'm assuming. So 5 guys can load a Brown and Sharp machine, or they can run multiples at the same time. And how do I handle the capacity for that? I would still turn around and set it up on each of the resources, because you're going to add the resources. They're still going to have a calendar. But what's the efficiency that you're getting out? Because an operator that's sitting focused on one machine, make sure that, okay, is it running? Is the bars going into it, or is the material going in? Versus if they're having to manage 5 machines, well, I could have a machine sitting idle while I'm loading or doing a repair on another. So then I'm going to get a different efficiency out, and I would turn around and calculate, okay, what's the average efficiency that we expect from this? Not just what's the efficiency the machine is supposed to run at. You guys are struggling when you're busy looking to go more finite scheduled in the future, but be able to get this dialed in. Brian, what I've also recommended people is turn around and set the first. If I have 5 machines in a resource group, I'll go ahead and set the first 4 machines as finite scheduled, and I'll leave the 5th one as infinite. So I'll go ahead and mark the first 4 as a finite resource, and then let Epicor throw everything at the 5th one. If you guys are having an overload where it's telling you, hey, we need more, you're going to see on that 5th machine an overload being reported, but it should schedule the exact time for those first 4 resources to be whatever your production plan is for that week. Again, adjust your calendar for, hey, do I need to take breaks out? Do I need to turn around and adjust for lunches or efficiency, and then round down to that whole hour? And that's what I would set the production plan up for that area. But again, you don't have to leave all the resources marked as infinite. You could go with, okay, I'm going to set the first base machines to be finite and then let Epicor throw everything at the last one. I've also seen people turn around and set up the 5 machines and then create a 5th resource in that group called the infinite. This is where Epicor throws everything else. That might be another way to look at this as well. Did that cover your question there, Brian? Mike
Hello?
has a question here. Yep.
Hey, it's Brian. So it's a little more complicated than that. So, you know, in our press forming area, for instance, we have 15 machines out there. Some days we have load on, 10 of them, and we have 10 operators to operate that. But it's always dynamic. So, it's not, we don't have 5 people that manage all these machines at the same time. It's 1 person per machine. And we don't always know what that's going to be. So we struggle with, we have 16 hours, we run 2 shifts on it, but we can't give it 16 hours of capacity because we don't have that many employees to do the actual labor on it.
And the machine can't run unattended?
Right.
Okay, so it requires a person.
And we do have some that are pretty much constantly full. Those ones aren't the problem, but we have other ones that are used for certain parts, certain size materials, and trying to find out when these machines could actually be run is where we're struggling.
And you have to have an operator to them?
Right.
The other would be scheduling the machine and the capability, or scheduling an operator directly to it.
So
and Epicor is going to make sure that the machine and the employee are available when it creates the schedule for that job.
Okay. So set them up as a secondary resource?
Correct.
Okay.
On the job or on the engineering. For the ones that are, if you have some, I'm thinking, if you have any machines that can run unattended, or where a person can go set it up and it can run on its own for a while, then I would say go ahead and leave those without the operator attached to it.
Okay. Thank you.
But if you do have a constraint that it has to have a specific operator and the machine, I would recommend putting both of them into the engineering or onto the job plan.
Okay.
That is going to show you some wonky results, because if that operator is not available, you may see that that job is now being scheduled 2 weeks out in the future, and you're going to be late on it, but that's just because the operator wasn't available to run that machine.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, I think we've got a, here you go.
Mike Burkell is out here. Is the shop calendar hours the only way to adjust capacity for efficiency? Yep. There really isn't an area where I can set an efficiency and have Epicor scheduler plan around it. I know this has been talked about, it's been requested. I'm almost going to say there's enough tickets out there that people have complained on this or wanted an SCR, but that I would recommend going back and saying to Epicor, hey, we want to be able to plan efficiencies as well into our resources that also take into account the schedule. You could do some things like a daily capacity or a concurrent capacity, but that's it only if you're making the same part on the same resource all the time. So I don't know as if that's going to be able to handle that, but as far as handling efficiency, you're going to have to adjust it into your production calendar. That's the only other way to do it, or pretty much the only way to do it. Nicholas Bender's got a question. Using MRP, we're able to create transfer order suggestions from one site to another that we can create a job from, but is it possible to link a job to a transfer order? I'm going to pull up that screen because I don't think that's in there. Job tracker's fine. I don't think you have the option to do a direct transfer order to the job. Nope, stock order, which would be a sales order, but not a transfer order, or the make to job. There's not the fourth option to handle the transfer order. So I really don't see a way to turn around and link the two without doing a customization there. Let me see, Wendy. I use time phase report to check if any suggestions did not get generated.
And Calvin, Wendy, I think she had further questions, so I've unmuted her.
I don't have more questions. I was just commenting on the MRP question. I use that report in Epicor because I don't have access to the company configuration and wouldn't be able to troubleshoot some stuff. So we don't have a lot of MRP suggestions, but I can look to see if something didn't pop up like it should.
The other thing, there is I got to look at the menu because I always get them backwards. It's towards the end of the module. The production planners. Production planners workbench where you can see shortages.
Yes, I use that also for change suggestions for making. And then sometimes when I wasn't seeing a suggestion that I should, and it turned
You
up.
find it in the planners.
Yeah.
Those would be the only areas that I know that you're going to see it right off the bat without writing your own report against the part detail table. Rick has a question. We use MRP log to find problems. We also go into the folder and delete old logs every week. Very good process, especially if your MRP log has the date built into how the file gets named. It's generally good to go in and clean out your old because there are boatloads of files that get generated by the system. Every time MRP, it logs the jobs that it makes, the unfirmed jobs as well as the firm jobs. Everything gets thrown out into that folder, and there will be thousands and thousands of files based on how many SKUs you have and how many jobs you're running. So going in and definitely cleaning those up is a big favorite. Thanks for bringing that up, Rick. This is kind of a pet peeve of mine. People come to me, our server's running out of room, and you find out that they haven't been cleaning up behind themselves. Turning on the advanced logging. Enabling the schedule debug log and including extra details. This will also be something you want to clean up, and that's why I said don't leave that turned on here. That is going to be dangerous. And Rick has a question. Here is an example of the log and a part that didn't get a PO suggestion created. Let me see here, processing part. And I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to give it a shot. Okay. So processing part, deleting suggestions, non-stock stock transactions, beginning balance, date change, creating a new PO suggestion. And you're saying it didn't create a PO suggestion for you? Let's see if we can go ahead and unmute Rick in here.
I've got Rick unmuted now. Rick, if you take yourself off mute, you can interact here.
Okay, can you hear me?
Got it.
Okay, yeah, this was part of our MRP run. This part did not have a PO suggestion come out for it.
But the log says that it did.
That's correct, and we don't understand why it didn't. It did, however. We run MRP at night, about 8 o'clock at night, and we also run it at noon. So it runs 2 times per day.
Okay.
It did not, the part did not come out with a PO suggestion this morning from last night's run, but it did come out this afternoon from MRP's run at lunch today.
And this was 11 o'clock or?
Yeah, 12 o'clock Chicago time.
No, the timestamp in your MRP log here is 2100 hours.
Yeah, that's last night's MRP log. But it says that the creating a new PO suggestion, but it did not. There was no PO suggestion for that part number this morning.
Was there anything in time phase?
Only
or in the transaction history tracker?
The newest transaction for this part was back in 2019.
Pete is wondering, is one of your MRPs a regenerate or a net change?
Both of them are regenerate.
But if it says that it created a new PO suggestion, it should have done that.
Yeah, it did not, and we don't know why. We have this logging turned on because we will run into some parts that just don't show up. We run into parts that do show up that shouldn't be there, that have no demands. And so we try to use this to see if we can find out what's going on. We do delete these logs once a week because they do take up a lot of space.
Yep. This would be one where I would take your database onto Epicor and say, okay, MRP is saying it's creating it, but then when you go look for it, nothing is there. Or is there a data directive or a method directive on the PO suggestion that's saying, dump it? Make sure that there's no customization in place running that's preventing MRP from generating that PO suggestion and saving it.
Okay, I will look into that, see if there's anything on that. I've looked at the part and its attributes look normal.
Yeah, because I've never seen where MRP logs that it's doing something and then it never did it. Normally it's just a case I never see it in the log that it even did anything.
Right.
So I would check if there's a data or method directive preventing that suggestion from being processed or completed.
Okay. All right, I'll look for that next. It's just, we see this from time to time, which is one of the reasons we have the log turned on.
Okay. Tam Garber here, if you make the material direct, it will allow the job direct on a transfer order. So for our question regarding transfer orders, it sounds like Tam has a suggestion how to handle this. Do you still have that question handy, Fred?
Give me a second. I gotta show the answered questions here. Using MRP, we are able to create transfer order suggestions from one site to another that we can create a job from. But is it possible to link a job to a transfer order?
So Michael, we do have, or Nicholas Bender, we do actually have a suggestion here that might help you guys. And I'm going to go ahead and take you off mute here. And Nicholas, if you want to go ahead and take yourself off mute, it sounds like you and Tam. You there, Nicholas?
Yep. Hi, Calvin.
Awesome. So Tam seems to have a solution here for you from Symmetry, from Picomet. I got a roll company name still. If you make the material direct, it will allow the job direct on a transfer order. So do you want to go ahead and give that a shot?
Yeah, make material direct on the sales order. You should be able to.
Where's that assault? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely give it a shot.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tam. Hey, that's why we're here. If everybody can share, it turns around and makes it much easier. And Lori Welch has a question. Suggestions can be deleted. Who has access to PO suggestions? Ooh, Rick, there's another idea for your PO. Epicor generated a suggestion, but it didn't show up. Did somebody accidentally delete it? And by putting a data directive on that PO suggestion, either new or change suggestion, putting it on both of those tables, you can track the delete transaction and then send the record off as an email to someone that might be able to at least find out what's happening. Did someone delete the suggestion? Arno has a question. Where are the MRP logs? You can't seem to find them. If you go under server, Epicor data. So whatever your server name is, where the Epicor data is, then I believe it's under reports. I actually have to go look at it. So on your server under Epicor data reports, the user, you would generally have your log files found under the username here. Kara Bates has a question. We went to 10.600.6 3 weeks ago. We've been having work stopping issues around the time MRP is scheduled to run at 2 in the morning. MRP says it's complete, but other scheduled processes, multi-company, start back up and our log files fill up and crash the system. We don't see anything obvious in the log files, and Epicor has been working with us, but we've been unable to work with third shift for 3 days due to the issue. Does anyone know if issues with MRP at 10.2600.6 they came out with .8 5 days after they upgraded? Don't need to wait till after the session, Kara. I'm going to go ahead and throw this out here as my last question for MRP. I would turn around and check if multi-company is running at the same time that MRP and you're running other processes, consider scheduling the other process to start after a certain amount of time that you leave for MRP to run. Whoever is putting together your system task schedules, make sure that they're not putting schedules out there that conflict with one another. You can have, I've seen people generate suggestions before MRP runs, and then they're like, why didn't we see anything? Well, you generated suggestions after Epicor made a boatload of jobs. You need to make sure that the schedules are put in the proper order. Everybody can get to that market recurring and click the drop down and attach it to a schedule, but someone has to be looking at the schedules and making sure that Epicor's business processes aren't crashing together. Running multi-company every 4 minutes, yes, definitely go ahead and pause that or set it up to run. Is there a way to pause it if you schedule it to run on a fixed schedule attached to the startup?
You could set up a schedule that runs around the hours of MRP. So you could run it from like midnight to 6 p.m.
It's set on a continuous it's on the system startup to run continuous. I'm going to assume that is correct, Kara. You're running this on a system startup schedule and it's just running natively every 4 minutes.
Let me find Kara and unmute her. I'm sorry. Kara, you're off mute. If you want to unmute yourself, you can join in here. And she says it used to work up until the upgrade.
Then I'm going to say it's probably something with the upgrade. I've recently worked with Nathan Anderson from tech support. He has a document out there for setting up process schedules and using the process sets to turn around and control when things are running. I don't know of any way in the system agent or the system task system to stop a perpetual running process like that, to allow MRP to go ahead and run. The other thing would be controlling how many processes and how many schedulers are running with MRP so that MRP isn't fully utilizing all of the resources on the server to run, and making sure that you have enough task agents running. You can run more than one task agent so that when MRP is running, multi-company could run against a different task agent. Make sure that you have more than one task agent also set up. Do you have multiples out there? Yes, you do. And you're still running into the collision. I'm going to say this is most likely an error than in 10.2.600.
And Pete's saying 10.2.600.9 is supposed to be released today for on-prem customers. Might be something to apply to a test version and see. And Pete says, release notes have an MRP performance for improved MRP performance by fixing the issue where during MRP execution, int queue out and IM job head rows were created and deleted for 10.2.600.7.
And those are the multi-company tables. So it's probably messing with the multi-company. It's creating queue
Exactly.
tables, and then multi-company is trying to process them, causing a deadlock.
Okay.
So the only suggestions I can give is have your SQL admin go to the SQL logs, and if you guys have trace flags enabled according to this Epicor setup guide, you can see if you're deadlocking the SQL error log, which is actually on the wherever your SQL database are. It'll kind of tell you if two processes are trying to modify the same row. So
Didn't you just post this on the E10 help?
yes, we had many
Okay,
issues
I'm like,
here. We had many issues with MRP throughout the versions, all kinds of stuff with indexes causing deadlocks, and actually we even had the VMware snapshots at 11 p.m. You run MRP, it snapshots that split second, breaks the connection to SQL, and MRP dies. So similar issues. It's kind of difficult to say it's just one thing. It could be even a Windows update. We've been there too.
okay, I know I'm way over my time here. I'm going to go ahead and